FAIRtax is coming, don't stand in the way. FAIRtax is coming across the USA. FAIRtax is coming, clean up this mess. We got to get rid of the IRS. Hey, hey! Hey, hey! On April 15th, when you're all out.
Hello and welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are the FAIRtax
FAIRtax
guys. And we have another special interview program for you today. Ron, set this up.
Well, Autry Pruitt is a board member of the Americans for Fair Taxation. And he's also, he's not, as you'll hear in the interview, he's not the typical Tea Party. He's not a Tea Party person at all. For one thing, I have to admit he's less than half my age, but for such a young person, he's very savvy, not only about politics, but about the social media and so forth. He's the one that advised us to put our shows on Spreaker.com, and we've been doing a lot better on that platform than our previous platforms.
Okay.
We're reaching out to more people, and Spreaker lets us reach out to iTunes. But Autry himself he has a radio show on Spreaker. He does it live most afternoons, and he's very passionate, as you'll hear. He's very passionate about the fair tax, about helping people and so forth. I would consider him a libertarian. He's not really a Democrat, Republican.
And he's not a traditional fair tax supporter.
No, not at all.
But and the topic of the day is how do we reach those folks?
But you'll hear, especially by the inflection in his voice sometimes, he is very passionate about the fair tax and how it's going to help people. That's good. And he's like I said, very knowledgeable about a lot of things. So he agreed to do this interview, and we thought it would be a good way, because the theme of this is why shouldn't everybody support the fair tax? Party affiliation should have nothing to do with it, okay? Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, and you're going to hear from Autry why that is not only possible, but why it's necessary. So, and this is the theme behind this episode.
All right, well, let's get right with it. Our interview with Autry Pruitt on FAIRtax Power Radio. And we're talking today with Autry Pruitt, somebody you may or may not have heard of. But he is a member of the board of Americans for Fair Taxation. That's the national grassroots organization supporting the fair tax. Autry, thank you so much for talking with us today.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
All right.
Glad to be on board.
All right, my pleasure. I'll tell you what, for people who don't recognize the name and don't know who Autry Pruitt is, talk a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and talk a bit about your political leanings and your aspirations there.
Well, my name's Autry. As you said, I'm the owner-host of Autry Live, also yourrepublic.com. That's the letter U, the letter R, the word republic.com. We are some have described us as a sort of progressive libertarian organization. I would say we're just libertarian thought differently. In fact, that's our motto. Started just about 4 years ago. We are, in terms of our political spectrum, most people would classify us probably as more center, down the center, a little bit more of a left leaning, particularly when it comes to social issues. And even economically, we tend to be aware of the left philosophical stance in the aisle.
So,
and I've been doing it now for 4 years, hosting the show, and we have the website, and we have a magazine that just came out as well.
Okay, you wanted to tell people how to get a hold of that?
So you can go to the website, UR, the letter U, the letter R, the word republic.com. And from that site, you can see the articles, you can see the magazine. You can email me at autry.tv. You can also go to autrylive.com. So there are tons of ways to get a hold of us. Or tweet me at AUTRY. And myself, for the social media expert, we have Lauren Tolan. She'll be more than happy to get you the information that's needed. And we have a lot of stuff coming out. We'll put you on the mailing list and get the stuff out to you as quick as we possibly can.
So it would be fair to say that you're not a Tea Partier.
That is absolutely correct. That is That is very fair to say.
Absolutely, because it seems that a lot of the support for the fair tax is coming from the right and not a whole lot from the center or the left. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think part of it's because of politics today. So one of the things I believe that's happening is that if one side supports something, then the other side is necessarily against it.
So it really doesn't matter what it is. If it's the other guy's idea, it's a bad one. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the case, and that's both for left and right. Another one is the optics. I think one of the issues that the progressive left has, I'm not saying this pejoratively, even though it may come across that way, is that a lot of it has to do about optics and diversity. And so right now, if you go to the FAIRtax website, if you look up a lot of FAIRtax pictures, it's usually middle class, upper middle class, older, I would say at least age 48 or above. Mostly those of European ancestry, individuals who support the FAIRtax. So and because of that, because of the optics there, that's another reason why people, I think, are hesitant to support that side. Another reason is a lot of it is the demagoguery that's occurred on the left concerning that it's going to raise your taxes, it's sales taxes, you won't get into. I mean, there's a lot of that going about, and that's because individuals such as Nancy Pelosi and a lot of the establishment Democrats in particular, and even establishment Republicans, those in the center, want to keep their power base, and a lot of their power base is surrounded by the income tax, or more importantly, the exceptions and the carve-outs and caveats that they can create from the income tax, and the sort of smoke and mirrors that the income tax creates.
Mm-hmm. There have been over a change a day running for the past 10 years, and nobody knows anything about it. It's a horribly corrupt system. It
is a horribly corrupt system, and I really believe fundamentally, and I don't get in discussions with individuals in FAIRtax, even though I know politically we disagree a lot, but I really fundamentally believe, myself as an African American, that the FAIRtax, as currently proposed, is just really a step forward and a way to go for both political philosophies, for those that are right-leaning, left-leaning, and those for in the center, and those for myself, such as libertarians. It really is the way to go. The cronyism that exists within the current income and corporate tax system is horrible. And it doesn't take much to. And this is what amazes me with the progressive side of the aisle, or those that lean towards my way. They would rather sit and have the current system in place than to look at a new system. That should tell you something. We've had the same income tax system. The poor are still poor, still broke. No matter how many changes, no matter how many times you up, no matter what you do, people are still in the same situation. And that would necessitate to me that, you know what, it's time for us to try something new.
Yeah, that's a point that a lot of people just kind of conveniently ignore, don't they?
President Obama said it. President Obama said, when he was talking about health care, if you've tried something for 50 years and it hasn't worked, then try something new. So I turn back to the president and say, well, let's look at our income tax system.
I would agree with him on that.
You tried something for more than 50 years. And then people that come and say, well, the flat tax. The flat tax is an income tax. The original income tax system we had now, for all intents and purposes, was a flat tax system. If you look at the original legislation passed, where it affected just about 4 or 5% of the country, it was a flat tax system, way better than the flat taxes now that are being proposed. That's why the fair tax is realistic. When you go to a Democrat or you go to anyone on the left and you show them the math and you say, listen, corporations don't pay taxes. I have this argument so many times with my friends on the left. Corporations do not pay taxes. They don't pay it. It all gets embedded either through jobs, either through a loss of benefits, a loss of jobs, or into consumer prices. Corporations don't pay taxes.
Yeah, they're treated just like any other cost of doing business, and they're passed on to their consumers, or they're passed on to their shareholders, or it's passed on to their employees.
And one of the things you're seeing with the current corporate high tax rate, you're seeing a lot of things that are occurring. One of the biggest things you're seeing is people are talking about a reduction in benefits.
All right, I want to focus a little bit on.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No. Fine. See, you get me started, I can keep going. No, go ahead. Ask me what.
I'm saying we kind of want to focus on some of the reasons that Democrats and centrists and libertarians that are not currently fair tax supporters, why they should support the fair tax. And I would guess at the top of that list would be progressivity. The Democrats and the people in the middle is always saying, you should not have a tax system that hurts the poor and the rich are never paying their fair share. How does the fair tax fix that, and how can we get that message through to the people who are currently not receiving it?
Well, as a national consumption tax, the more you consume, then the more you pay. Basic sales tax. Those who make more money by far and large consume more and therefore will pay more. One of the things that's built into the fair tax is a prebate. The notion that, yes, rather than have exclusion, the authors of the fair tax came up with the idea and said, we can't get into this exception business again because that's what got us in the mess in the first place. So basically we're going to say, across the board, we're going to have an exemption, a prebate. So every month a family will get a check for the amount of taxes that they paid through this national consumption tax that they should not have paid.
Mm-hmm.
And so using that system, this is really great, by the way. Using that system, it is very possible that if you're poor, even if you're lower middle class, maybe even if you're middle class, less so middle class, but if you're lower middle class and poor, you could actually get away with really paying zero in taxes. Because not only do you get the prebate, but get this, and this is what I've said with the left can pick this up, you also have no taxes on used goods, which I think will bolster the environmentalists, those who are concerned about recyclables in the country. All of a sudden, if you're really poor and you shop at Goodwill, Salvation Army, or a used computer store, you get a used car, no taxes, no consumption taxes on those.
So you're saying the fair tax is the only plan out there that completely untaxes poor people, because the working poor people now are paying one of the most highly regressive taxes in the book, the payroll taxes for Medicare and Social Security.
Yeah, and so what's hurting, the reason why the left and the center don't get on, one is they don't understand it. It's the whole, I see some Tea Partiers in support of it. I see there's mostly older whites in support of it. That's the reason why they're not supporting it. That's a frontline reason, but they should support it.
But when they'll listen to you when they won't listen to those stereotypical fair tax supporters. When you get somebody's ear who's in the center or the left part of the political spectrum, what do you usually get from them? Can you usually reach them once they really understand what you're talking about?
Yes. Once I get them one-on-one or in a small group, like 3 or 4 people, and we have a back and forth, I can usually get them. Because usually the first thing is I can point to is I say, let's look at the current system. And everybody agrees that that's broken. Then when they say the consumption when I talk about going to consumption tax, they say, well, that disproportionately affects the poor. Then what I do is I talk about the prebate. Mm-hmm. And they say, oh, well, everybody gets a check. I say yes. Now, by the way, there's a little nugget in there I'm going to give you in a second. A little nugget. Some of my fair tax colleagues aren't going to be happy when I give you this little nugget. But there's a little nugget in there that I've given out to some Democrats before that I know on the Hill, in fact. So that's one. 2, the other thing I talk about is the improvement in the environment. The fact that individuals, in terms of the environment, are encouraged to buy used goods. I really believe the fair tax will cause a whole industry of resellers to rise up in business, reselling clothes, reselling shoes, because the fair tax has already been paid on those. So if you go buy used goods, it actually encourages you to buy used products.
So you can say this is something the climate change folks could get on board with.
Yeah, the environmentalists should be on board with this to say, hey, if you're really concerned about carbon emissions, if you're really concerned about all the stuff that takes to make these products and how we've become this consumer-based society and it's hurting the environment, get on board with the fair tax, because we actually encourage people in our tax plan to get used goods. So that's two. Third, with regards to libertarians, what I tell libertarians, what I tell progressives are two different things. Now, with regards to libertarians, what I tell libertarians is real simple. Libertarians, you're trying to focus on how much the government is spending. You can't focus on how much the government is spending because all the time is spent on how we raise the money. All the time is spent on revenue collection, on income raising, on the 74,000 page of tax code. And nobody talks about the 1,000-page budget. No one talks about that. But all of a sudden, if you simplify the tax code to these 20 to 25 pages, with probably maybe another 10 pages of regulatory rule, all of a sudden you're going to notice national attention will shift from talking about revenue raising to talk about expenditures. Mm-hmm. So that's what I tell libertarians. If you really want to focus on expenditures, libertarians are also concerned about the government being overly involved in your documents, able to use the tax law to get around freedom of association or to get around any number of other restrictions that are on the government in the Bill of Rights. So what I tell libertarians is if you eliminate that end of the bargain, eliminate that income tax, then you have just literally chopped almost in half government's authority to get into your books, your private life.
It does not make any sense at all that you have to share the intimate details of your personal finances. You have to tell the government more than you're comfortable telling your own kids, for crying out loud.
Exactly. I mean, and then for those who are concerned about cyber hacking, when I talk to people that are concerned, I say, hey, this is great for that too, because all of a sudden, overnight, your life can be away from the government. Now, is it a perfect libertarian solution? No. Is it a perfect progressive solution? No.
But it's a darn sight better than what we got.
It is a 99% leap over what we've got now. And so the real solution, it's better for African Americans. When I talk to African American groups, I say it's better for African Americans because we're not changing anything on the spending side of the equation. Yes, do a lot of FAIRtax current supporters don't agree universal health care coverage and Obamacare. A lot don't agree with certain social welfare programs or the SNAP benefit food program. But the FAIRtax touches none of that. The FAIRtax simply changes how we collect the money. And if anything, if you really study The Economist and read about it, from the Democrats, they actually predict that in a decade's time, we'll actually raise even more money. And you'll probably be able to help the poor more. Now, I know that's disconcerting to some of the Tea Party advocates. There are reasons. And the tax code is used to conquer and divide, and it's eating everybody alive. It doesn't matter the race. It's eating everybody alive.
Yeah, well, I think withholding is one of the most cruel hoaxes ever perpetrated on the American people because the government is stepping up and saying, I am your highest spending priority. You will pay me before you feed your family. And you ask somebody, how much money do you make now? The ones that tell you none of your business are probably right, but the others will tell you how much they take home. They don't even consider what the government snatches off the top to be their money to begin with.
Yeah. And the proof is this. I love this. So I get people that say to me, well, I get $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 back. Family too, I get $10,000 back. So you mean to tell me you get anywhere from $800 to $1,000 a month back? Now, I want you to go back and add up your late fees. Go back to how many times did you get an NSF fee? How many times did you need just a little bit of extra money this month? Or a toy came out and you wanted to get your son or your daughter a new toy. Now, you just felt like, what, it's been a lot of stress. I just want to go out with my guys and have one or two drinks or go see a movie, and you don't have that money. You don't have that money because the government's holding your money. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, Republican. Poor is poor. I grew up broke, busted, and disgusted. I'm telling you, broke is broke. There's no Republican broke and Democrat broke, black broke and white broke. There's just broke.
Oh, yeah. I've been there.
So the government is holding your money.
and you ask them real simple, would you rather have a tax refund once a year, or would you rather have the full amount of your paycheck every pay period? And that usually gets it through to them.
Yeah. You get your full, if you make 30, they just came out with that report. 50% of Americans make $30K a year, but they actually only take home $24. Imagine this. All of a sudden, you get your full $30K every single year. Your full $30K. And if you're savvy about it and you start buying used products, you can't do it with groceries, you can't do it with services, but you start buying used products. You know, I'm not considered poor now. I'm not considered broke now, and I still buy used computers.
Sure, why not?
If it works, especially since I'm a Mac user. You know, imagine that you get, and that's what I tell people. When I go and I speak in front of a Democrat office, Democrat audience, I can say, "Let me see. Anybody got a W-2 they don't mind me seeing?" And then he usually has their whole year. And I say, under the fair tax, all that money they took out is yours. You don't have to guesstimate. You don't have to say, "Oh, am I going to get it back?" You get it. Oh, you get what you're working for. You get what you're worth.
Yeah, I don't know anybody of any political persuasion that does not like the idea of having more money in their pockets.
No, you're 100% right. You're 100% right. And that's the real strategy. We as fair tax people, if you want to get to people on the left, you want to get to people, don't get into, because this happens with fair taxers, because it's happened with me. Don't talk about Obama. Don't talk about Democrats. Don't talk bad about, as much as you can't stand Hillary Clinton, keep your mouth shut. Don't talk about that. Say, you know what? If you want to vote for Hillary, that's your right. You go ahead and do it. What I want to talk about is the fact that every single freaking paycheck, the government is taking 10, 15, 20, 25% of your money. And then you get it back at the end of the year, and you don't get any interest on it. And then on top of not getting interest on it, your money has been slowly eaten away throughout the course of the year because of the inflation caused by the Fed. And that's particularly close if you're poor. And this is why I say you have people at paycheck loan places, payday loan places, paying 300% and 400% interest. They're paying 300% and 400% interest on a loan for $200 or $100, when if the government let them keep their money, they wouldn't need the loan. That's the biggest progressive advance that can be made today is the fair tax. And everything else that has been proposed, the flat tax, the higher tax on the rich, guess what? Even if they tax the rich more, they're still taking your money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
it's not going to be back like it was when it only hits the top 3 or 4%.
And even if they come along and all of a sudden they say, hey, you know what? You're poor. You didn't take any money. We didn't take any money from you. Guess what? When you went to that grocery store, when you went and bought your baby those shoes, when you did that, embedded in there was about 35% in taxes. I believe it will take about a year, but once the fair tax passes, you will see an across-the-board 10% drop in prices. So even though we propose a 23% rate, the effective rate will be somewhere closer to 13%, because I believe you will see prices drop like no other, because all of those corporate embedded taxes will be ripped out. And then all the money that's overseas and all the corporations that are going overseas will come back to the shores. The fair tax is, and this is what I tell it, stop taking people's words. The fair tax is real. It's not, oh, we might, it's a real change.
All right. Well, I tell you what, time flies when we're having fun. We're happy to talk to you. We certainly appreciate your efforts on behalf of the fair tax and your time talking to us today.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much. Again, this is Autry Pruitt for FAIRtax Power Radio.
All right. Very interesting interview there with Autry Pruitt. You have a copious set of notes over there. Have at it.
Well, I told you he was very passionate about the fair tax, and that's because
you were right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was on the ball enough, I might say, to take down some notes because I wouldn't remember everything that he talked about. The prebate helps the poor. We know that. The prebate is the key to fairness in the fair tax. All right, people who criticize the fair tax, especially when they don't truly study it and understand it, they'll say, well, a knee-jerk reaction, it's a sales tax, it hurts the poor, it's regressive. No, The fair tax has the prebate, which is the mechanism that protects the poor from paying taxes on what it costs to stay alive. Nobody should have, in a consumption tax world, nobody should have to pay taxes on what it costs to stay alive. And that's what the prebate does. And he recognized that. So his comments about the prebate, very important, because that is probably the most important feature of the fair tax, along with its simplicity.
Yeah, the prebate is a tax refund,
Yeah.
not an entitlement, as some people might have you believe.
Exactly. Yeah, it is not an entitlement. And I've had people, on both sides of the aisle say that, oh, it's just another entitlement. No. It's what makes the fair tax work. It is absolutely necessary, and it won't pass without the prebate. That's all.
It won't work without the prebate.
It won't. That's true. No tax on used goods. That also helps the poor. He said, imagine the people who are just squeaking by. You get rid of the income tax. They get their whole paycheck. They get the prebate. And if they want to buy a used car, great. That's, when my wife and I were still struggling, I was going to college and so forth, you're darn right I bought used cars. And our first house was very used.
And
but
no fair tax on used purchases.
No fair tax on used purchases.
The original
That's right.
purchaser at the retail level.
No double dipping by the federal government. You pay the fair tax on something once, such as an automobile, a house, or whatever, and it's not fair taxed again. Okay,
well, I'm glad to see that somebody like Autry, who is not the traditional stereotypical fair tax supporter you think of, is seeing these things, and hopefully more people who think like him can see the same thing.
And that's the purpose behind this episode. It shouldn't make any difference if you're Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, or from Mars. It doesn't make any difference. If you live in this country and you really understand the fair tax, you need to be behind it. Now, one of the things he brought up that I never thought of before was that the no tax on used goods also helps the environment. He says he believes the environmentalists get behind the fair tax when they learn about this because it encourages people to buy used stuff. And he's absolutely right. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of energy that goes into building a car. So if the encouragement is to buy a used car, that's going to save energy and it's going to, help the environment. So that's a very good take on his part.
Oh, yeah. We could go on and on and on. He's got lots of good stuff to deal with here.
Yeah.
But let's tell folks again, as Congressman Yoho said to us a couple of days ago, that we've got to get public support behind this thing.
Oh,
if we,
absolutely.
the people, don't stand up and demand it, they, the politicians, ain't going to give it to us.
That's right. Not everybody is like Mr. Yoho up there in Congress. Some people are just kind of in it for themselves. So we need to straighten those people out. We need to make sure everybody, no matter where you live in this country, you need to contact your congressman and let them know you're a fair tax supporter and you expect them to be a fair tax supporter and co-sponsor the legislation. Do it now. Give them a call. All right. Whoever your congressmen or senators are, they're on the website someplace. So call them up. Calling their offices is very effective. They get 15 calls on the same issue. It goes in the agenda for the discussion in the next day. Yep.
Amen. It does. And bigsolution.org. Got to mention that.
Yep. Bigsolution.org is how you can get involved. All right. There are several buttons when you go to bigsolution.org. All right. One of them is connect, so that the Americans for Fair Taxation have your information and can keep you informed. Support, contribute. You know what contribute is. And a very important one is building the voter tree. Putting in names and email addresses of your friends and relatives and so forth. They have the option to opt out. They don't have to get involved if they don't want to, but we need to build up this voter tree or database so the people in Congress.
Really quick, your wife is across the room watching us, and if you don't mention her webinar, you're going to be in a heap of trouble. Oh, that's
right. Yep. Usually the fourth Thursday of every month, the webinar is a way to learn about the fair tax in the comfort of your own home at your computer. You go to fairtax.org/webinar. You register for the event. They'll send you an email with a link in it. And about 5 minutes before the event, it's always 8 o'clock on the fourth Thursday of the month, about 5 minutes before. You'll click the link and boom, you're in. And it's interactive. You can ask questions and get answers.
All right. And that's all the time we've got for this edition of
Goodness.
FairTax Power Radio. Time flies when you're having fun, right?
Wow.
Bob Paxton here, Ron Malero, the FairTax guys, reminding you America's big solution. The FairTax is America's big solution, and once you understand it,
You'll demand it.
FairTax is coming. Don't send in the